Hey everyone, welcome to the SIP series on the Stir podcast, brought to you by Gazelle Media. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin. And once again, we are joined by my guest co-host, author, entertainment columnist, and sitcom producer, Debbie Baldwin. Hello, Debbie.
Hey, Trish. Glad to be here.
Yeah, likewise. This is going to be a fun list, but before we get, Deb, autumn is officially here. I can't believe we are at the end of September.
It's amazing. I mean, in some ways, September has felt like it's 72 days, but, so I'm kind of glad to be looking into October, but it's, Halloween stuff is out. It's, normalcy seems to be slowly returning. So,
well, I mentioned that because it seems like it was just yesterday we were talking about the release of your first ever novel, False Front, which actually came out in May. And then there you have it. But now here we are, and the sequel to False Front is actually going through the finishing touches. Isn't that right?
I was actually hoping to have a picture of the cover to show you today, but it's not quite there yet. So
keep them in suspense just a little bit longer.
Yeah. But I'm shooting to have it up for pre-order in early November and a December 1st release. So I'm really excited about it. It's the mystery, the suspense plot is really tight and I think interesting. So hopefully
Yay! Well, and those of us who have read it, we are excited about it. And really, if you haven't, you really should have already. And especially now that the sequel is soon to come out, you need to prepare for the sequel. So to those of you who haven't gotten your hands on False Front, the book is available on Amazon and other online book retailers.
Almost all of them, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to turn our attention to this week's recommended list of movies. A few of these movies are actually movies I've seen over and over again, Deb. We are talking about movies that rock and roll movies, films that grab you, not only with the music, but also with the caliber of the acting and the storyline.
Definitely. And, I may have played a little fast and loose with the definition of rock and roll, but I think it's a good list, and it's had me like humming along soundtracks and, wanting to, putting them in my Netflix queue and checking Amazon to see if they're streaming. So, it's a very fun bunch of movies.
Well, I mean, we forgive you with that because rock and roll really is a derivative of other musical genres, and from rock and roll comes other things, so we're fine. These are really, really cool movies, and we're going to start with a film that is the highest grossing film in Ireland of all time. Didn't really do too well at the American box office, but has since achieved cult status since it came out in 1991, and we are talking about the film The Commitments.
Yes, The Commitments is 1991, and it's an Alan Parker film, who's a fantastic director, and it is this fun, lighthearted story about a kid who wants to put together a blues band, in the tradition of, like Wilson Pickett, and just it's a shit show from the beginning. Like, these guys don't get along, and they're stealing equipment, and they're destroying equipment, and they're fighting, and this poor kid is trying to keep them all glued together to make it in the industry. And it's more just a little kind of a slice of life film with great music, great acting. And, it's just very endearing. And I know, as you said, it only did about $14 million at the US box office. It was largely an unknown cast.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the great acting. The director and his crew really wanted this to be, they wanted to hire a cast that was really, they had to be musicians first. And so what they did with the casting call is they went to the bars, they went to the club, they went to the concert venues, they sought out people out in the streets busking, And so you did have a relatively unknown cast, but as you said, it worked so well.
Yes. A talented group, you know, and it has that kind of gritty vibe of like the Full Monty, or, you know, these other kind of independent European films out of the UK. And it's just a fun movie with great music and a kind of a crazy story. And, you know, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it.
And the soundtrack, my God, it's been described as a cross between the Big Chill and the Blues Brothers. How could you go wrong with something like that?
And that's, if you don't want to watch the movie, download
Listen
the soundtrack.
to the soundtrack.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got
song.
Al Green, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, like you said. My God, you'd be in heaven with this soundtrack.
Yeah.
All right, so this guy's going to come up a little later, but you know, Glenn Hansard, the star of the movie Once, was actually in this film as the guitar player, and his character was named Outspan Foster. And Glenn Hansard hasn't really talked about this film this much because he didn't have a good experience while filming, did not get along with the director, and apparently was only able to see the entire movie and enjoy it 20 years later. And so there's an actual fan theory going around, Deb, that his character in The Commitments, Outspan Foster, is the same character as in the movie Once.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, because in Commitments, the last time you see him on screen, he is out in the streets busking. And then when the movie Once opens, he is out in the street busking. And if you recall, if you were paying attention to the movie Once, the lead guy did not have a name. He was an unnamed character. Right. He was just referred to as Boy in the script. And so there's this theory going around, which is kind of neat if you've seen this movie and then you saw Once, you know, like a continuation of his story.
Very cool.
It is very cool.
Trivia.
Yes. And so we're going to jump on to 1996. Dab, this movie. I love this movie. Such a fun movie. And it is That Thing You Do, written and directed by Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks in a supporting role in this movie. But oh my gosh, probably one of my favorite movies of his.
And this was, you know, a big deal at the time that Tom Hanks had ventured into screenwriting and directing. It's this wonderful story of this band that is trying to make it. It is reminiscent of the Beatles. It's set in the 60s.
It was supposedly set 1 year after the Beatles came to America.
Okay.
So.
And the band, you know, the band name is one of the funniest aspects of the entire film, which is they're called the Oneders, but it's spelled O-N-E-1 D-E-R-S. And so people keep calling them the Oneders. And it's just ridiculous. And this whole dynamic of this group of guys, again, it's just another, you know, a lot of these movies have this common theme running through of everything that could possibly go wrong when, you know, you're trying to make it in that industry. And you really sort of watch some of these films and think, how does anyone get successful? But so yes, this movie, and it stars another great cast. Tom Everett Scott is the sort of main force behind the band.
Yes.
Jonathan Sach, who is, I think he's Christina Applegate's ex-husband, but I'm not 100%.
Oh, that's why that name sounded familiar. So. Yes.
Liv Tyler, Charlize Theron, Steve Zahn. It's the ensemble cast is incredibly strong. The music's fantastic. It has that very kind of 60s early rock.
So catchy. So catchy.
And
I mean, that song is the one that's been playing in, you know.
Yes. And in true Tom Hanks form, it's family friendly. You know, if memory serves, I think it's a very good film for kids. So
yes.
Yeah.
And I think at the time it was considered a vanity project by Tom Hanks. He was getting out of the Forrest Gump, you know, Oscar elite phase. And this was one, well, if I can do that, I can do this. And my gosh, he did succeed so well. And actually, he wrote a couple of the songs, if you can believe that. for the movie, including that drum solo that Guy does when he, proclaims, I am Spartacus. So that was written by Tom Hanks. And so, this was a really fun movie. And I'm also a big fan of the Beatles. So you do get a lot of those Beatles references. Yes. The name, for instance, the Oneders, the Wonders. Right. The Beatles intentionally misspelled the Beatles.
It's B-E-A-T Beatles.
Exactly.
Which I am embarrassed to admit I had never put that together. I mean,
yeah, so they did that. So that was an homage to that. And then the story of the group taking off after they replaced the original drummer. That's what happened with the Beatles. That's what happened with this group. They replaced their drummer with a character named Guy, who was Tom Everett Scott. And then also when they appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, the leader of the band, and Jimmy, he was captioned with careful girls, he's engaged. And then that's also what happened with the Beatles. When they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, John Lennon was captioned with, sorry girls, he's married. So, I mean, it's just so fun to just spot these, parallels with what happened with the Beatles. So definitely. Yeah, fun movie all around. All right, so our next movie is from the year 2000, and it made, quite a splash when it came out. And this movie is a kind of sort of autobiographical account of writer and director Cameron Crowe's life. And we are, of course, talking about Almost Famous.
Yes, Almost Famous. It's so in another league on this list because in addition to being a rock and roll movie, it's a very powerful film. As you mentioned, Cameron Crowe is a writer for Rolling Stone as growing up, and he has said in interviews that during those assignments, he fell in love for the first time. He lost his virginity for the first time. He did drugs for the first time. It was all this baptism by fire.
He was a teenager at the time.
Yes. And as is the main character in the story, who's portrayed by Patrick Fugit, and is just this kid on a tour bus with this band. And there's been a lot of speculation about who the band's supposed to be. People say it's Poco. People say it's, I can't even remember the other
Allman
band.
Brothers. Cameron Crowe toured with the Allman Brothers, The Who, the Eagles. But he has said, I believe, that the band Stillwater, the fictional band in the movie, is just a composite of all the bands that he knew from his days as a writer. Yes.
And it's this very gritty look at the inner workings of a band and the strain of artistic differences and personality differences. And whereas all these films, as I mentioned, there's this sort of thread about the struggles of the group dynamic, this one really captures that inability to suppress your own impulses to see a bigger picture of the success of the band. Like, it's these sort of almost childish, impulsive, drug-fueled behaviors with that first taste of success. Billy Crudup and Jason Lee play the two main characters in the film. Kate Hudson, really, this was her breakout role as the band groupie. She calls them Band-Aids because she claims that they're not there to have sex with the guys, that
they're there for the music.
For the music. But the entire cast is outstanding, and it won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. It's just a really great film.
And as far as rock and roll consultants, this film had it all. They had Peter Frampton apparently as the main consultant, and Cameron Crowe and his then wife at the time, which I didn't know was Nancy Wilson of Heart.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
They co-wrote a couple of songs in the film. Peter Frampton also wrote some songs in the film. It was actually Peter Frampton who taught Billy Crudup how to play the guitar for the film in his role as Russell Hammond. So they had a lot of, rock and roll types involved with this movie.
Why has no one made a movie about Heart? Has there been one? I really would
I don't
wait in
believe
line
so.
to see that.
I don't believe so, but that would be a good movie. Imagine
Oh
the
my God.
two people that you can cast in those leads. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right about that. One other tidbit about this movie. Deb, did you know this? Cameron Crowe spent a few months working with Brad Pitt for the role of Russell Hammond. Did you know that?
I did not, but I'm not surprised by it. I can see him maybe playing that role.
Well, but apparently, in the long run, Brad lost interest, saying, quote, "I just don't get it enough to do it." That's what he said. Brad left, and then it came down to Christian Bale and Billy Crudup. And then Billy, of course, ended up with a role.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. So we're going to move on to another movie, also the same year, came out the same year. This one is based on a 1995 novel by Nick Hornsby. The novel itself was set in London, but for the movie, they modified it to be set in Chicago. And we are talking about the film High Fidelity. And this is one of those movies I'll see over and over and over again.
And I have to say, Nick Hornby is one of my favorite writers. High Fidelity, the book, if you haven't read it, is fantastic. He also wrote the novel about a boy, which became a fantastic Hugh Grant movie.
Right.
This story is about a record store owner. We'll stick with the film story, in Chicago, played by John Cusack. And he's got these two sort of flunkies that work in this record store with him, one of whom is Jack Black, who comes up later in our list.
Yeah.
And it's just this coming of age story about, on the one hand, he discovers these two idiots who steal from his record store are pretty talented musicians. So he's going to make a record with them. And at the same time, he's trying to win back his girlfriend. And there's this thread through the story of these record store workers who, for fun, constantly are making these lists of their top 5 anything.
Well, they're supposed to be musical snobs.
Remember? Yeah, so they openly mock their customers when they're looking for albums. It's the funniest. I mean, you think, why would I ever go in this record store? Please, if you're looking for a Neil Diamond album, go somewhere else.
Right. And so John Cusack as Rob Gordon, and then his flunkies are Dick and Barry. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's hilarious just thinking about this movie, especially those scenes in the record store. And I had mentioned in the past, I think Jack Black stole this movie from him.
100%. And I think John Cusack let him. I think John Cusack, is that kind of an actor that he can appreciate. He was probably loving what Jack Black was doing as much as, the audience ultimately
loved. How could you stop that? How could you stop all that? And you have to, it's worth the price of admission to see the ending of this movie and see Barry, Jack Black, perform with his band Sonic Death Monkey, because it is just, the cherry on top of this already really, really, really cool film. And another part about this movie that I love are, were the cameos, especially Tim Robinson.
Yes. Every moment of this film is entertaining. And, while the Jack Black's Tenacious D film is not on the list, he does perform. So it's,
he sure does. Yeah. He is a rock and roll superstar.
So the Sonic Death Monkeys are featured.
So from Sonic Death Monkeys to School of Rock, our next film is 2003. And, Jack Black had a supporting role in High Fidelity, and now he is front and center for this movie. So another Cusack co-starring with him, and that is Joan Cusack. And Deb, this movie, made almost $100 million more than its budget. It was the highest grossing music-themed movie of all time until Pitch Perfect came along.
And it's no small wonder. And also that both of those films appeal to that very hard to defined demographic, or that very hard to please demographic.
Yes.
Of, that sort of 12 to 20, teenagers. And it's, they've grown out of like Disney animated films, but they're not ready necessarily for R-rated movies. And this is just hits in that sweet spot. And it's entertaining for any age.
I was going to say, for us grown-ups too, it was fun.
Oh, I mean, really, and Jack Black in his heyday, I would watch him in anything. He's so endearing. I mean, the movie The Holiday with Cameron Diaz.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It's just, he's just wonderful. And he can really almost play any role. He's not that classic Hollywood guy, but he's so likable that it sort of eclipses the fact that he doesn't, necessarily look like George Clooney. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, I just think he's so adorable. He has something about him, like a teddy bear type thing.
Yes.
So you mentioned Tenacious D. Have you ever seen a show?
Not live.
Okay, so I've seen them at least like 2 or 3 times live, and his persona for Tenacious D, JB, is actually the closest that he is in real life. And I'm not sure if I should say I'm proud or ashamed to admit that I actually was able to score a Jack Black sweaty towel. I begged him for it, and I got it, and for a while considered never ever washing it until my husband said that's just the most disgusting thing ever. So I still have the Jack Black towel. It's been washed though.
Now, do you know why the band is called Tenacious D?
I think I did, but I've forgotten. It's been so long. Why? Remind me.
They were watching football one night, and the announcer was talking about the defense on the field.
That's
and
right.
said, they're really showing some Tenacious D.
There you go.
I guess they were like, that's a great name for a band. You can just sort of see Jack Black going.
Yeah. So
but
go figure.
School of Rock is just a fun film. Jack Black plays this kind of struggling musician. He's short on rent. He's got this very respectable roommate who he shares the apartment with. And in a desperate mood for money, takes the call for the roommate to substitute teach at this very elite private school where Joan Cusack plays the principal.
Correct.
And, shows up, and he's supposed to be this very respectable, buttoned up teacher. And he gets these kids who all, have kind of troubled home lives in the sense that, their parents all want them to be doctors or whatever's going on, but he's showing them the beauty of a musical outlet and putting together this sort of little band with the kids. And it's fantastic. The movie is so heartwarming. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the reason that there was such magic with this movie, well, I understand the idea for the film came from the fact that the writer, Mike White, was inspired by his one-time next-door neighbor, Jack Black, who apparently lived in the same apartment building where Jack Black would reportedly run naked through the halls and play his music really, really loud. So much of the music that Jack Black, the neighbor, was rocking to and running down the halls naked to, was used in the movie.
And Mike White plays the buttoned-up roommate.
Yeah.
And way to make lemonade out of lemons.
No kidding. You think that's like, the neighbor you stay away from, but here you are. I mean, he's in the starring role for this movie. Yeah. So great movie. Another cool movie, again, belongs to my list of movies that I would stop and see over and over again, no matter what I'm doing, is a movie from 2007 with, I thought, Deb, was quite an unlikely pairing, Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore in music and lyrics.
Now it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think this is a largely overlooked romantic comedy. And I almost think it could have been on our list of romantic comedies that you probably haven't seen.
True.
Hugh Grant plays, it's the parallels with Wham are obvious. He plays a kind of washed up rock star. He's supposedly the sort of Andrew Ridgeley of the Wham duo.
Andrew Ridgeley to Under the Shadow of George Michael.
And his partner has gone on to become this huge success. and he's struggling to revive his career. And Drew Barrymore plays Cora, his plant watering lady, who comes to his apartment to water his plants. And as they kind of interact, she has this talent for writing lyrics, and they start working together to come up with a song. Oh no, wait, her name's not Cora. Cora's the name of the
Cora's the pop star.
Britney Spears girl, right?
Yes.
Sorry. But anyway,
right.
he and the Drew Barrymore character work together to come up with this song, and it's just this little love story, this romantic comedy between the two of them. It's less a movie about rock and roll, although there are some hilarious clips.
Oh my God.
Of Hugh Grant's character performing in the 80s with those
yes.
old MTV videos with those ridiculous special effects.
Those choreographed moves that were supposedly trademarked by, by him.
Right, his hip thrust, which he can't do anymore because he's so old that his hip doesn't really do it. Yeah. So it's a cute film. The songs are all original, but they're very, little earworm potential for his big hit from when he.
Oh my God, I think so, because it it reminds you of the 80s, reminds you of Wham.
Totally.
I mean, even that
Duran.
Definitely. Even that pseudo video that they did is such a highlight of the film that I like to watch that over and over again. So Hugh Grant, as a young boy, took piano lessons from Andrew Lloyd Webber's mother. And just like many of us who took piano lessons as young children and weren't really, thrilled about it, he forgot everything he had learned. So for this movie, he had to relearn how to play the piano so that when they show his hands playing the piano, he's actually playing the piano. So just a little tidbit. And I thought it was interesting that it was Andrew Lloyd Webber's mother.
How do you come up with these things? You're doing a deep dive.
Deep dive. All right. So we're going to go to the year 2012. And this movie, I really don't know what to think of it. It's based on the Broadway musical of the same name. We're talking about 80s glam rock, 80s big hair rock, like Def Leppard, Poison, Bon Jovi, Joan Jett.
Journey.
Yes, we're talking about Rock of Ages.
And I thought it was interesting that they refer to this film as a jukebox musical, which it is 100%. Every single song, one after the other, is, if you grew up with that music, if you, from Don't Stop Believin' to, there's every single song is a huge hit that
Yes.
I added the movie to the list in deference of the Broadway show, which is phenomenal. The movie is miscast, unfortunately. Julianne Hough, who people may know from, I think, Dancing with the Stars.
I think so, yeah.
Derek Hough's sister. And I say this, I hate being critical, but her acting is lacking.
You can say it, because that was the first thing that I picked out about this movie. I was a little underwhelmed.
And it really, from that first moment, she's the big, pie-eyed star with dreams of coming to Hollywood and making it as a singer. And, you just kind of go, oh, darn. Because you want to love the movie and you want it to be so good. But it sort of, deflates that balloon of hope at the beginning of the film. That being said, if you kind of overlook it, the rest of the cast is great, from, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Tom Cruise, Russell Brand, Alec Baldwin. It goes on and on and on.
You're really stargazing throughout the movie, and that was the fun part of this movie.
Even Diego Boneta, who's the male lead, who's a big singing talent in, I think, Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, is really fun to watch. And the story is funny. There's some great little moments with the characters, and really, without question, the main reason to watch the movie is for the music, though.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the main reason to
Oh,
watch the
I know what
movie.
you're gonna say. Should we say it together?
1, 2,
One, 2,
3.
3. Tom
Tom Cruise.
Cruise's abs.
His abs. Tom Cruise as Stacy Jacks, which I understand was inspired in, the way that he kind of came up with his performance. It was a combination of Jim Morrison and Axl Rose. And that is definitely, Deb, I consider worth the price of admission. I think it eclipses the music for this film for me. So
It really suits him, that role. You can see why he wanted to play it, for sure.
Oh my God. So first of all, this is his own voice. He took voice lessons for several months, sometimes rehearsing 5 hours a day. And also during those months, speaking of the abs, Deb, he did push-ups.
Let me fan you off.
I have a fan blowing at me right now. So he did push-ups and abs while he was doing voice work. So you see that on stage when he is, the one performance I'm talking about in particular was Pour Some Sugar on Me. And he is slithering across the stage. And the really cool thing about that was that Def Leppard, who, performs Pour Some Sugar on Me, the band happened to be in the States during some of the filming, and they were among those in the audience when Tom Cruise taped that particular scene. So that was kind of neat.
So fun.
Yes. You could tell, no nerves whatsoever from Mr. Cruise. He went all out for that performance.
Yeah, there's a closet rock star inside of him for sure.
Wow, he can do everything, Debbie. Like, we talk about him doing all these things. Now you add rock star, Axl Rose type, on stage. My God.
Yeah.
So, wow. Okay, so we are going to 2013, and we are going to talk about a movie called Begin Again. It's a little bit more low-key than Rock of Ages. And this one is starring Mark Ruffalo, Keira Knightley, and Adam Levine of Maroon 5.
And if you've seen the movie once, it's a very similar story with the same screenwriter behind it, who was a man named John Carney. This film is a very charming movie. It is not, however, a romantic comedy, which is the same situation with Once.
Yes.
It's not really a romance, but it does involve this relationship between the Mark Ruffalo character, who's kind of a struggling music producer, and Keira Knightley, who is a musician in the purest sense of the word. She's not really interested in fame. She's incredibly talented, and Keira Knightley, who's not my favorite actress, does a fantastic job. She's very appealing in this movie. And her ex-boyfriend, who's played by Adam Levine, is, he doesn't have a huge role in the film, but he does a fantastic job. I was really pleasantly surprised. I didn't know it was him for the first couple of scenes. That's how impressive he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he is making it big. He's commercializing his music. He's, selling out in her mind. Any chance of sort of those two repairing the rift in their relationship sort of dissolves when the Adam Levine character is selling out. She thinks of him as a sellout. So she sort of teams up with Mark Ruffalo, and they are working on songs together, and she is helping the Ruffalo character rediscover his love of music and sort of the purity of the art form. And he's trying to help her make it, but she doesn't really care about making it so much. And it's just a sweet story. Mark Ruffalo is estranged from his wife, who he loves, and they have a child together. And I think in the sort of message of this movie is the Mark Ruffalo character kind of healing from being chewed up by the industry. And it's just a great story. It is romantic in a weird way, but I wouldn't call it a romance. But it's
correct. You're right. You're right.
I love the story.
Yeah, it is just a very nice, well-told story. And I find that interesting that you mentioned that you enjoyed Keira Knightley's performance because apparently the director did not for some reason, which surprised me a little bit when I was doing my deep dive into this movie. So John Carney, the director, famously did not get along during the making of this film. Carney originally wanted to cast an actual singer. He was thinking maybe about Adele or Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine. Even Scarlett Johansson was in talks to play the lead role, but dropped out. And John Carney had stated in an interview that he didn't like Knightley's performance under his direction. So maybe he's like taking part of the blame. But then he also says that maybe he should have cast a proper film actress as opposed to a Hollywood model type. He later apologized for his remarks.
That's rough.
It was kind of rough.
I bet she did
didn't
great
really notice anything bad about Keira Knightley's performance.
No, I think she has a pretty voice. I had no complaints about her performance, and Mark Ruffalo is a genius behind the camera.
Mark Ruffalo is Mark Ruffalo.
I mean, he can sort of do no wrong in my mind. So, and they worked incredibly well together. Their chemistry was great. No,
yes.
I have no complaints about Keira Knightley's performance at all.
Yes, you're right about that. Speaking of just chemistry that was just oozing off the screen, Deb, this was one hot movie, one hot pairing, 2018's A Star is Born, starring Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. Oh my goodness.
Now, I have to say, when I put A Star is Born on the list and you replied to me, which one? And I was thinking to myself, well, really, it could have been any of them.
Right.
I mean, we could do just a podcast on the 4 incarnations of A Star is Born. The first one in 1937
which is unbelievable.
Janet Gaynor and Frederick March, and in that story, they are actors. Now, I say this because I really think there's something there in another remake.
Oh, yeah.
I think it'd be very cool to see this movie with the characters as wannabe stars in film. In the 1954 version, now we start to bleed into music where Judy Garland is a singer, but she's trying to, again, make it in film. And her partner in the 1954 version is James Mason, which always makes me laugh. If you don't know who he is, it's John Hamm does this fantastic impersonation of him on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
He's this very classic Hollywood. So it's,
right.
And then 76, Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson.
Everybody loved
how phenomenal that was. The first 2 versions have this very momentous scene at the end where the female character stands and introduces herself as Mrs., her husband's name, in a showing to her audience that her love and loyalty lie with her husband.
Correct.
Tried to say that without any spoilers. They adapt that a little bit in the later 2 versions because it's a little sort of got that kind of non-feminist mentality.
Yeah.
But the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version it's so rare to have so many good remakes. They all got Oscar nominations. She won for the music. Their chemistry on screen was fantastic. The story is beautiful, and what a tearjerker.
Right.
And the
again, story, like you said, there were several iterations of this movie. The script for this version, as I understand, was inspired by Kurt Cobain's story of Nirvana. Of course, the frontman for Nirvana.
Which fits.
Yes, definitely.
It fits in with the story very well. The male character, the Bradley Cooper character, is kind of an over-the-hills performer. In this version, I think he's sort of a country rock artist.
Music. Jackson, Maine is his name. Can't get any more country sounding than that.
And which incidentally is Maine is the last name of the character in the first 2 versions.
Right.
But he's struggling with drugs and alcohol and kind of discovers the Lady Gaga character as she's just, hitting her stride. So it's his descent, her ascent,
Yes.
and their love story.
Yes. And you can kind of see in the plot there how that might not work out. So
the writing's on the wall.
yeah. So, okay, maybe there is hope for your hopes for a sequel of maybe a different kind of angle for this movie, because this particular version, this one from 2018, they started talking about this remake way back in the early 90s, Deb. I don't know if you knew that getting this movie made took a lot of maneuverings when it finally ended up with Bradley Cooper. So it started in the early 90s. It's gone through quite a few interpretations. Initially, Will Smith was involved to play the title role. And then from Will Smith, the project went to Jamie Foxx and Oliver Stone. And Jamie Foxx wanted the late R&B star Aaliyah to be one of the lead roles, and also the late, relatively recently passed away Paul Walker as the co-star with Aaliyah. So there was that iteration of it. And then we had Lauryn Hill, Mariah Carey also discussed to be the lead role for a version of it. And then Clint Eastwood gets involved in 2011. And at that time, there were talks that Beyonce was going to be involved, but that came to a halt because Beyonce got pregnant. And then it ended up on Bradley Cooper's lap. And up until 2015, 5 years ago, Beyonce was still involved. And then, of course, in 2016, that's when we heard that Lady Gaga was officially on board. So for 20 years, there was this, topsy-turvy trajectory for this movie, which is...
That is a crazy story. I mean, how it can take anyone that long to get their act together. But, there's all these little cogs in the machine, and they all have to function for it to, run.
So maybe they're actually already thinking about the next remake. We don't even know about it just yet.
5.
Okay.
We joke, but that's not too far off.
No, not at all, not at all. So really quickly, Lady Gaga, who stars in this movie, her real name is Stefani Joanne Angelina Germanotta. And she got her stage name from the song Radio Gaga, which of course is from the legendary rock band Queen. I say that because guess what's next on our list?
Excellent.
Yes. Same year, Bohemian Rhapsody.
And now, let me just preface this by saying there are a ton of documentaries or biopics about rock bands. Fantastic ones. And I chose 2 on this list that I felt were the most accessible for a modern viewer.
Sure.
That being said, as soon as I said rock and roll documentary, it made me think rockumentary, which immediately makes me think of This Is Spinal Tap, which I cannot believe I left off this list. Please rent This Is Spinal Tap. I mean, what a fantastic satire about a rock band touring the U.S. Guest, Michael McKean. It's phenomenal. Now, back to Bohemian Rhapsody. Which was, as you said, the 2018 film about the life story of Freddie Mercury, who is the lead singer of Queen, and led a fascinating life. Rami Malek plays the title, or not the title character, but plays Freddie Mercury, and won an Oscar for his performance. The story of Queen, while modified a bit for the film, is pretty close to accurate. It's a really interesting story. I mean, Freddie Mercury, as most people know, passed away from complications of AIDS. And this story of his sort of troubled personal life, as an artist, as much as, coming to terms with the fact that he's a gay man. And it's beautiful and it's brilliantly acted, and he's got the statue to prove it.
Wow, yeah.
And yeah, it's a very, very good story with, as the reason for this list, phenomenal music.
Oh, yes. And I definitely think it deserves to be on the list. Brian May, who is, of course, Queen's guitar god, was involved with this movie from the get-go. And he said that one of his responsibilities was to ensure that the film did not harm Freddie Mercury's legacy. And Queen's drummer, Roger Taylor, was also involved with the film. And together, both of them really drove this film and just made sure that, you had those moments of accuracy and insight into what the band was all about.
And it's interesting that you say that, because if I had one criticism of the film, it would be that the film doesn't really explore the darkness of that sort of late 70s, early 80s period of Freddie Mercury's life. And so the fact that you say that, I kind of understand now why it was a little bit glossed over.
Yes.
In my opinion. I don't know,
Well, and we're going to compare it with the next film on our list too, in terms of, I believe Bohemian Rhapsody was a PG-13 film.
And the thing that I absolutely, one little moment, in addition to, first of all, every song in that film, you can't believe half the time you're sitting your eyes going, I didn't realize Queen sang that song. And you want to get up and dance in the theater. It's their body of music, that band, is unbelievable.
Yes.
And my favorite, Mike Myers, has a cameo. He's almost unrecognizable as a movie industry executive for EMI.
I didn't know Deb until after that scene.
Yeah, and he says to the guys, they play him Bohemian Rhapsody, which is 8 minutes long, and he says to them, or however many minutes long, I think it's 8, but he says, no one is going to listen to an 8-minute long song in their car. I can't put this on the radio. And immediately your mind goes to Wayne and Garth in the Pacer playing Bohemian Rhapsody. So it was kind of a cute little.
Yes, it is. And you're right. I think it was the delivery of that particular line when I realized that it was him. I did not know. I completely had no clue.
You kind of expect him to go, into the camera.
Yeah.
But it was very cute.
So that was a favorite scene. And also another favorite scene of mine was the actual concert when they recreated it. Queen's Live Aid performance, generally considered one of the top live rock and roll performances in history.
I got goosebumps, that Live Aid performance. Just hearing you say it again, imagining that performance.
Yes.
He has been diagnosed. He's battling HIV/AIDS. He is
getting chills now.
This song that, it is prophetic. If the lyrics of that song, there's not a dry eye in the house when he's singing that song and performing on that stage. It's incredible. It's one of the most brilliant moments in film, period.
And I really think, to me, that's when Rami Malek earned his Oscar, because if you look at the footage from the real concert, side by side, frame by frame, next to Rami Malek's performance, it matches to the millisecond. And just the sheer amount of physicality that is involved in that and preparation, oh my God, that was just, I had to see that thing over and over and over again, because it's just, jaw-dropping to see him perform as Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, it was, he really paid a nice tribute to a genius talent in music, no question. Yeah. Freddie Mercury had an 8-octave range. I can always remember on those old American Idol shows, Simon Cowell saying to the contestants, don't sing Celine Dion, don't sing Whitney Houston, and don't sing Freddie Mercury, because you will never recreate it as well as the original. It's, pointless, and it's 100% accurate. Freddie Mercury was just a unique talent.
Well, as a side note to that, the guy who did Dare to Sing Queen and Freddie Mercury, Adam Lambert, in his audition, guess what Adam Lambert is doing now? He is the front man for Queen. And so, my God.
Did you know that Adam Lambert has a cameo in Bohemian Rhapsody?
I found out after the movie. So the next time I saw the movie, I had to pay particular attention to it. Very brief, but he was definitely there.
Yeah.
And so speaking about that voice, it was definitely not an easy task to recreate that voice for the movie. So the voice was actually, I'm told, a combination of Freddie Mercury's voice along with the voice of Canadian singer Mark Martel, and those two voices were dubbed together with Rami Malek's voice to produce the Freddie Mercury voice that you hear in the film.
And I will say, as an audience member, I was suspicious of the voice, but it didn't detract from the movie for me.
Not at all. You're so wrapped up in everything else that, it was cool. And the music is so cool in and of itself.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move on to the final film on our list, and it is from last year, 2019. So we were talking about Bohemian Rhapsody being a PG-13 film. This film got an R rating. Again, this is one of those movies that was also 2 decades in the making. And one of the major sticking points was that the studios wanted a PG-13 movie. And the subject of this movie, Sir Elton John, had maintained all along, and I quote, "I did not lead a PG-13 life." And so we are talking about the movie Rocket Man.
And you've got to love Elton John for saying it. I mean, the guy owns it, and he's been sober for 30 years, and I'm sure says, calls it like he sees it. And Rocket Man is a very unusual movie that in many ways is brilliant. I will say I needed to see it twice. It has this very surreal quality where it's half kind of biopic, half movie musical. And,
just like the man himself, though, don't you think?
Bust out in song, right. And it stars Taron Egerton, who plays Elton John, who does a really wonderful job. I mean, he's fantastic.
And it's his own voice, Deb. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yes, it's his voice.
That's very interesting. And of course, Jamie Bell plays Elton John's longtime collaborator, Bernie Taupin. And Jamie Bell, we all remember from Billy Elliot, and he's all grown up now.
I know.
But you still sort of think of him as that little boy.
Yeah, you do.
But and I will say that the years have been pretty good to him compared to some child stars.
Definitely.
But it's just the story of Elton John's life. He fell deeply into all kinds of addictions: sex, drugs, alcohol, shopping. They make this joke at the end of the movie that when he gets clean, that he still struggles with the shopping. But,
And, just like Elton John's life itself, this movie is such eye candy. It was so much fun to watch. And so Taron went through 53 pairs of glasses throughout the film. And that iconic Elton John video from the 80s, "I'm Still Standing."
I've got "I'm Still Standing" running through my head right now.
So that is the actual
and it will
video.
be for the rest of the day, so thank you.
I know, it's one of those songs that won't ever leave you. So they used the actual video in the film. The only thing they did was replace Elton with Taron. But that was the 1980 video.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. The magic of computers.
Exactly. So there you have it. Wow, what a list. I mean, I am kind of giddy with anticipation because I'm going to rewatch some of these movies now.
I know, me too. So many of them you could just watch over and over.
Correct. Okay, so since a few of us have actually gone to back to our pseudo lives, the kids are back in school, maybe, in front of Zoom, but they are back in school, and some of us have begun, getting out there and being out and about. The fall tends to be busier anyway. So for our sweet treat this week, Deb, we're really going to start to feature recipes that are relatively simple and easy to make. Last week, we had a 3-ingredient recipe, those pretzel turtles. And this week, our featured sweet treat is going to make use of canned pie filling. And it could be any kind of fruit filling, apple, cherries, blueberry, what have you. And we're going to layer the pie filling between 2 lightly sweetened buttery crusts. And the recipe name is actually called a pie bar. But to me, it seems more like a cross between a cobbler and a pie. So.
And hostess fruit pie.
Yeah. And so it's just having.
Don't get me wrong.
I know.
They're fantastic.
So for our test kitchen this week, we actually tried it with cherry pie filling and then a homemade crust and a simple glaze, which all the ingredients you'll find in your pantry and a couple eggs from your fridge. So that is what we're working on this week. And you will find that recipe, of course, on gazellemagazine.com.
Excellent.
So thank you all for watching our show. Thank you to Debbie. Always a pleasure. And get to work on finishing that sequel to False Front.
I'm going right back to it as soon as I hang up with you.
All right. See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.